Here's the athlete seasonal life cycle of most triathletes. Gung-ho, March, April, May, race June, July, oh crap, something happens, obstacle, injury, life thing, skids to a halt, rushes in, trains hurt, goes into an Ironman with, this year just hasn't really been what it's going to be, and I'll just take some time off. And then they race in September, and then October, November, December, and they're like, I'm just going to take off and enjoy myself, and then I'll start back in January. And then January comes, like, I'll wait a little bit longer. And then February's like, the season really isn't here. It's kind of the off season. And they hop back in March, and whoa, where do I find myself? I don't know, but right back where I was.
Technology strikes again.
Yeah, we got today. But welcome, Crushing Iron Podcast, episode 287.
No, I think it's 286, but...
Oh, really? Well, before you know it, it'll be 287. But we're here. We're inching our way towards 300. We come to you twice a week, usually Monday and Thursday. A little bit late today, if we can ever be late, due to some technical difficulties, because we got guilty of trying to upgrade some headsets, and we should have just stuck with the standard.
Should have stuck with our main plan. No, I was actually talking about this on my daily YouTube video last night about how technology is really a new language. I'm way older than you are, of course, and you're still in the young, like, techie set. You kind of grew up in the tech world. But,
you act like I'm like 25. I didn't really grow up in like the tech world. I mean, dude, I've been on Facebook for like 2.5 years. So,
yeah, I grew up.
And you know me from working with me and being best friends for like 6 years. That I am one of the least tech savvy people you're gonna find.
Yeah, listen, man. I went to college. I had a computer science class when they were just coming out, these computer things, and we spent the whole semester logging on. That's how complicated it was. It was like a 80-step process of back hashtags and backslashes and underscores, and I don't know if I ever even got logged on to that computer, to be honest. It was a whole course.
Yeah, but, you were. I was part of the AOL dial-up age.
Oh, so, me too. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, so I'm not. I was definitely didn't have to learn how to log on, but I get it. But yeah, we tried to upgrade, but we're back to the standard, and here we are. And we appreciate you joining us on what is a lovely but hot Thursday here in Chattanooga, and I'm sure it's the same there where you are in Nashville, and pretty much wherever you are listening. We appreciate you taking the time. Subscribe. Go back to the archives and listen. We have quite the trove of knowledge and experience and occasional wisdom, covering all aspects of triathlon, life, the mental, emotional, and physical aspects of both and how they kind of intersect. So dig deep if you haven't. We have some good ones back there and, some mediocre ones probably. So we appreciate you listening. If you haven't, always hop on over to crushingiron.com. That is kind of our one-stop shop in terms of all the things that we kind of have our hands in: training plans, coaching, gear, our club membership, videos, swim analysis, you name it is there. Peruse it, and if you have questions, always reach out. But we are excited, and hey, it's full-on triathlon season. We're in the middle of it. I've got a few topics today, but I have a feeling you've got an itch to cover something.
Well, I'm just amazed at how quickly you wanted to dive into triathlon. I was still stuck on AOL. I was kind of like flashing back to my days of spending $2.99 for 3 minutes, and my first bill was like $200.
Trying to pick up a few ladies in the old chat room.
Oh man, the chat rooms. Like, speaking of addictive personalities, man, I was just all in. I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen.
And now you do it every day with random people across the world.
Yeah, it's just easy to do now, but
yeah, it's crazy.
Anyway, that was fun.
Yeah.
But no, I don't have any topics. I was just kind of like noodling around with my new book this morning.
You're just noodling around.
Yeah, writing a new book.
Well, you and I talked about this a little bit last week, and what?
You don't even care about what my book's about? I mean, I'm writing a book, for goodness sakes.
I mean, listen, man, I've got a little resentment towards you right now, and I have it ever since I gave you like my favorite book, and I don't think you ever even read it.
Oh, it's sitting
So
there.
every time, exactly, it's sitting there. It's probably holding a cup of coffee or one of your 16 mics. So go ahead, let us know what book you're reading, and we just know it's not The Obstacle Is the Way, which I
No, I'm
gifted you
writing
about
a
a year
book.
ago. Oh, you're writing a book. I thought you said you're reading a book.
No, no, no. I'm writing a
Oh,
book. It's called A Common Man's Guide to Training for Ironman and Not Always Feeling Like Ass. Well, except for your
yes,
hamstrings.
there goes the explicit lyrics. Okay, glad we covered that.
I
Well,
thought maybe
great
that'd
title. I'm
kick
glad
off a
it's short and
topic.
sweet and to the point. Yeah. And now we've officially derailed.
Yeah,
That
no.
sounds like a great topic.
Thank you.
And a great title. I'm sure going to have a lot of people purchase that. And best of luck to you.
Yeah, if I can just figure out how to publish it.
Yeah, I'll let you kind of do that one on the side.
Yeah, side project. Anyway, yeah, what do you got on your mind there, buddy?
So, I briefly mentioned this to you last week when you were up here visiting, but I had an interesting conversation with actually one of our podcast listeners. It's not an athlete that I coach, but just a listener, and they emailed and wanted to reach out and see if we could set up a call to talk about a few things. And I do that every once in a while. And I think while we are totally in, for the most part, what a lot of athletes would consider like the main part of their racing season, and it is because there's more races going on right now. I think a lot of athletes struggle with determining where in the 12-month cycle, because most triathletes look at everything in a 12-month cycle. They look at January is the beginning of the year, then December is the end of the year, and I need to periodize my training depending on the race season. But the fact of the matter is there are a ton of athletes out there, and I know quite a few listening, who have either already done their big race of the year or are kind of stuck. And what I mean by stuck is they're stuck in what to do. Should I press? Should I press on? Or what is oftentimes the smartest thing to do? Should I scrap the rest of the year and begin to focus on 2020? And this athlete I was talking to yesterday has no more races for the rest of the year, had kind of floundered a little bit early on this year and kind of found themselves suffering from minor injuries here and there. And the first kind of thought you have as a triathlete is, hey, there are races everywhere. Everyone else is racing. I need to find a race. I need to find a way. I need to press on. I got to get back in the game. And what you find is these athletes are never really getting better. They're never getting recovered. They're just staying hurt. They're straddling that fence between hurt and injured. And that's all they are. And they're never getting better. They're never improving. They're never making performance games. They're stuck. But it's a huge carrot out there because there are so many races, and everyone else that it seems is also racing. And so this athlete is in a different part of the world. And I said, listen, like you have to understand that right now it's July. We're getting into August. Yeah, there's 4 months left of the year, but this is technically your off season. You don't have any races. You need to get healthy. You need to start to rebuild. And if you're looking at tackling this early season race next year, you need to start looking at August as your January. Because so many people think off-season focus or off-season building or maintenance or foundational things always have to be covered January, February, March. But if you're an athlete who has an early season race projected next year, this is something like myself included, where you are right now needs to be at a totally different preparation and in a totally different phase than all of your other triathlete friends around you. And so I think that's something that needs to that we could kind of touch on a little bit in terms of it's always helpful to identify where you are specifically as an athlete, in your athlete life cycle and development, and then what is your biggest race down the road? If you've got an early season Ironman like I do next year, I'm going to race Ironman Texas. So that's in April. I'm trying to get back in the groove right now. I've got Texas or 70.3 Waco in end of October. The way that I'm looking at it is I'm not looking to peak and have that be like this huge A race in Waco. I want it to be kind of a building block towards Texas. And so I just think that there are a lot of athletes out there and a lot of listeners, as we've kind of seen in our Facebook group. If you haven't joined, you can always search on Facebook. You can search Crushing Iron Group and be a part of the conversation. A lot of great people in there. But I've kind of been surprised and kind of reminded of how many people are commenting like they have no races this year. They're looking towards next year already. But everything everyone talks about right now is race season, race season, race season, race season. And for for a specific part of that triathlon population, that's not really relevant. And so I thought it could be kind of a something we could touch on today in terms of kind of maybe going over a simple checklist of, is it time to scrap the year? Which I think is kind of a separate conversation in of itself. And I know there are many athletes, and there are some that I even coach that I've kind of told, I'm like, listen, like the rest of this year is not 2019. The rest of this year is building and rebuilding your foundation and creating and kind of rediscovering who you are as an athlete to prepare you for what you actually want to do in 2020. Mm-hmm. And that's difficult for some people because it's so far away, but it's so important if you can finally kind of, swallow your pride per se and just and maybe it's also a level of acceptance. It can also be a huge stress relief and burden to think, all right, I don't have anything left this year. I don't have to hurry. I don't have to press. I don't have to have this gigantic sense of urgency. I can start to chip away and plan at something that's really, really important to me that I want to accomplish next year. There is nothing wrong with that vision. There is nothing wrong with that mode of thinking, and it's actually quite healthy to do that and kind of go through that thought process.
Yeah, I think that's a good topic. I'd also like to roll that into people that are training for races late season that are, have fallen apart a little bit or have faced, I don't want to say obstacles along the way, and maybe they're, okay, my A race is out there, but man, I'm dealing with some problems or I'm dealing with some struggles. And, we talk a lot about, we've kind of talked and sort of joked about hashtag training day or whatever for races. But I think sometimes that does become a reality. I think when we talk about it, we mean don't put it out there as a training day because you just want to take pressure off yourself and you want to have the ability to say, I really wasn't racing that when you're capable. But a lot of times I think that, I know there's several people that we're working with in the club and that have had things come up and they have a big race in a month or two. And I don't think that they're anywhere near ready or where they want it to be either. So it's kind of a regroup mid-season, and it's not like throwing in the towel, but how can you get the most out of where you're at right now? And I think that's really what it kind of comes down to, is like evaluating your situation and not letting it be, like it can turn it into a negative. It's like, damn, I got to do this race and I'm not, I'm hurt or I'm dealing with these injuries or whatever the case is. So does that make sense, or is that?
They're the exact same.
Yeah. So I guess I'm trying to keep, because it's almost like, where are you? Where are you in this whole cycle? And that's always kind of the question you need to ask, I guess. You can break it into years, or you can break it into months, or whatever. But the reality is, you have to kind of take that inventory and say, okay. And I was thinking about this big time because I was talking about, again, I'm doing these daily YouTube videos and after my workouts on the way to Wisconsin, and I was thinking about it in terms of speed work and how a lot of times we jump out of our comfort zone for speed work, and that causes so many problems, So where are you? What can you handle? And that sort of thing. I don't mean to knock you off your train of thought or anything, but
no, I think essentially at the core they're the exact same. I think athletes really find themselves in this part of the year in this I have to mode. Because they've signed up for a race, therefore they have to do it. Or I have to train for this, or I have to do this. And that's just not the way you need to look at anything. It should be that you want to do it, that it's exciting, that you feel ready, that you feel a level of preparedness, that's something that you're really, really yearning to do, and you're enjoying the process and how that's affecting your life and how your training is going. But for athletes like that have kind of found themselves in kind of a mid-season slump, or way behind what, because listen, I mean, most athletes this time of year, no matter what, even if they're having a pretty good healthy year, in January, February, like, oh well, this time, in July, August, I'm going to be ready to do this, and then what, life happens. You change jobs, you move cities, you get out of relationships, you start relationships, you have little niggles here, you have surgeries, everything that's not involved in your triathlon life that you couldn't have predicted in January when you set out these expectations that really were formulated based around the perfect life with no interruptions and no obstacles. Well, what happens is those kind of filter in and our expectations don't change, and so we kind of find ourselves treading water instead of just calling it a day and say, you know what, maybe it's actually just time to get out of the pool, relearn how to swim. Because, like I said, so let me use this phrase that I think a lot of people might take offense to, and that's okay. Is that a lot of people this time of year find themselves exercising, not training. And what I mean by that is, if you have a sporadic training site, if you have sporadic workouts where there is no rhyme or reason, where you're doing 1 or 2 things a week and then you stop, and then maybe 3 or 4 things a week and then you stop, and there's really no rhyme or reason for anything that you're doing, you're just simply trying to surging and going back and then pushing forward again and having to draw back because of whatever, you're just exercising. You're not training. You're not training for anything specific. You're not in a training cycle, because the differences are training has a method, it has a madness, it has periodization to it, it has levels of intensity distribution that like to be followed. It's specific, and it's specific towards you, and it's specific towards a goal. But most athletes, and this is all times here, to be honest with you, find themselves in that mode of random exercise is not I'm training. I think those two words are oftentimes just put together as the exact same thing, but they're not. They're very different. And for athletes, like you were saying, and like some of the athletes in you that worked with that have had little things that are, that they're dealing with niggles, or they're just behind the 8 ball, if you will. There is nothing wrong with re-racking. Just because you're stuck behind the 8 ball doesn't mean, with your training and where you thought you might be, doesn't mean you have to keep fighting to get around it. Stop, re-rack it, take a few, and then decide how you want to attack the rest of the season, or if you even want to call it a rest of the season. And what I mean by that, and I know that's like a complicated thing, and it's kind of disheartening for a lot of athletes, because you have all these high hopes, and you might feel like a quitter, and you might feel like you're drawing back, and what am I going to accomplish? But unless you're planning on retiring at the end of this year, what do you have to lose? Like so many athletes find themselves in this vicious cycle every single year. We all know these athletes, we're probably friends with some of them, that are perpetually injured or hurt all the time. They're never really training full on. They're either getting injured or getting hurt, or they're in some mode of recovery. So unless you're healthy for a long period of time and you're allowing yourself the ability to be consistent, so we can see those performance gains, you can be a part of a lengthy process that's going to yield those results, you're always going to be kind of stagnant. Your ebbs and flows are going to be even, so the mean is going to be just that baseline of, here I am, here's my fitness, and it's pretty much the same as it was last year. Whereas instead of having 2 or 3 years where your fitness and your times are pretty much the exact same because you keep falling into that same vicious cycle over and over and over again, don't think of it as, I got to sacrifice this year to do this. Think of it as, I have my long-term interest in mind, and I have things that are important to me, and I want to target a race this year. I mean, could even be like late next year. So it's 18 months away, 20 months away, maybe even longer. But the fact of the matter is guess what? You might need that amount of time to get ready for it. You might not want to hear that, but you might need that long to get ready for it. Like, there is no such thing as too much time. We're in the world now where everything has to be done now. Everything has to be answered right now. Everything is urgent. Everything is immediate. I have to do it right now. I have to do it this year. I got to train for an Ironman in 6 months, and then I'm going to quit. And it has to be done right now. No, it doesn't. If you're a one and doneer, then that's fine. That's your prerogative. Go along that journey, and it won't be nearly as fulfilling, but have fun. But if you're a person who really wants to explore their athletic ability and achieve things and learn more about themselves through this journey that is triathlon and how it integrates with life, then there really is no expiration date. There really is no dead end. And we've talked about this before on many podcasts about how people see races as expiration dates, and so they'll have this item in their pantry, their race that's they think it's about to go stale, and so they end up eating it and suffering through, 16 gallons of expired milk because they had to drink it because after that it was over. Versus, you know what? I can probably just throw it out, maybe save my money, and then maybe, not buy milk anymore, or just buy some more down the road. But why do I have to put myself through this agony just because I've already got it? And I just think that there's a lot to be gained by looking at yourself and doing a really hardcore personal inventory, mentally, emotionally, physically, the things you're good at, the things you're not good at, what you've excelled at, what you haven't excelled at, when you've gotten injured, why you got injured, how long have you stayed hurt, do you take the time you need to recover, swim, bike, run, nutrition, are all these things, in terms of those three, like what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, what's the best time of year to focus on things, where does my life sit? All those things and all that inventory are things you have to they just can't be random. You can't just pick and choose just because. A new race got announced. Guess what? I'm doing that register. And then 2 weeks later, you look back and you're like, oh, crap, that falls like right into the middle of summer where all my kids' things are crazy and this is going to suck. Plan things out, think it through. And there is nothing wrong with accepting that where you are right now isn't where you wanted to be. But it doesn't mean you have to continue to suffer in that pattern of, I'm not, I wish I was, or this isn't. It can just be, let's start from scratch. I know where I want to go. Let's get better. Let's find the roadmap how, and let's get to work on where I want to go next. But in order to do that, you have to address the past, be prepared to accept the present, and then you can plan for where you want to go in the future.
One of our things in this podcast is that we talk about things that we've gone through and mistakes we've made, and hopefully that by sharing some of those things can help other people. And, again, I was talking about this last night too, is this how far am I willing to go? And sometimes, this will be my 7th straight year doing Ironman. And several of those were kind of along the lines of what you were just talking about, sort of like, I'm going to just sign up, I'm going to do it. And this, the point is this is my first time that I really feel like I'm approaching it the right way. It's taken me this long to learn that, or to accept certain things, or to approach things in a way that makes sense for the long term, and maybe at least accept some patience along the way. And by that I mean I kind of got done last year not feeling good about the race, really. Felt okay about it, but I kind of got on board right after that. Nothing crazy. That was the point when, back to your point about exercise versus training, I was just sort of like, at some point people need to exercise and then train and actually move back and forth a little bit. And that's what I was doing. And because training, as I see right now, this is why I was joking about that book I'm writing, but I might write it. But it's like, you have to be careful in this cycle. Training is intense, and you have to be ready for training, and most of us try to just keep sucking it up and going after it day after day after day. And I think in our guts we know something is a little bit off sometimes, and I've done that in the past where I just keep jumping into the grinder, and then I get to the race and expect some kind of miracle to happen, but it rarely does. And, this year, for example, I did Chattanooga 70.3 in May, right? And I have pretty much given away to temptation of doing other races this season. And I'm just sort of slowly focusing on what I want to do and trying to stay in the best mental and physical condition to go after that race up in Wisconsin. And, it's a grind, man. And, I just think that that's so important to be able to, you get people that are like, I think I can turn this around in a couple months and, whatever. But it's such a long game, especially for us as we get older, and we have to respect our body. And when I say how far will I go, am I willing to, I'm getting older, right? A lot of guys are taking testosterone and doing other things like that, and I'm just not willing to do that. I don't know what that means long term, and I am coming more and more to terms with the idea of long term. It's like, okay, what can I do today that's going to make me feel better tomorrow? And if you just take it day by day like that, that's pretty powerful. You can't think about 15 years from now, but like, what's going on today that's going to make me feel better tomorrow?
And I think you brought up a great point. Like, listen, there's nothing wrong with exercising. Like, I didn't mean that as like a slap in the face, but there's just a huge difference, and a lot of people confuse the two. But you do need to stay in shape so you can be ready to train.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times people will take 3 steps forward and 4 steps back. And that's how they end up really finding themselves in that mean fitness area of consistent, this and that, with no huge gains one way or the other. Now, and once you've been, and let me be honest, like once you've been in the sport for a long time, unless you're jacked up on some juice or testosterone, you're not going to see gigantic fitness gains. Like it's just really, really hard to chip. Like it's like, let's take myself for example. Like the very, very, very first 70.3 I ever did, my time was a 6:08, and then I chipped it down to 5:30, and then I got down to 5 hours, and I got down to 4:45, and then I've just kind of been regrettably and kind of frustratingly stuck. And like my last 5 or 6 70.3s have been in like the 4:30 range. So you're, percentage wise, it's going to shrink. In terms of the time increases, you're not going to see these gigantic gains, but you should always at least feel like you're moving steadily in the right direction. And that's why this part of the year is so tough, and why so many people find themselves in a stuck place. And like I was saying this on my run this morning, I ran into work, and this was the first time I've ran in, I don't know, since I've kind of gotten back and consistent again these last 4 weeks. And I thought, hey, whoa, hey there. Hey, buddy, there's the old me. For like 2 seconds, I kind of felt like the old fitness me from last year was like kind of, showing its ugly head. And I ran by this other couple, and they were out there doing their run, and I just couldn't help but think, and I've used this phrase with a lot of athletes recently, is how thankful, or how much more thankful I would be right now had I been more consistent over the winter. And so many people so here's what happens. Here's the athlete seasonal life cycle of most triathletes. Gung-ho, March, April, May, race June, July, oh crap, something happens, obstacle, injury, life thing, skids to a halt, rushes in, trains hurt, goes into Chattanooga because I'm living here. Goes into an Ironman with this year just hasn't really been what it's going to be, and I'll just take some time off. And then they race in September, and then October, November, December. They're like, I'm just going to take off and enjoy myself, and then I'll start back in January. And then January comes, like, I'll wait a little bit longer. And then February's like, the season really isn't here. It's kind of the off season. And they hop back in March, and whoa, where do I find myself? I don't know, but right back where I was. And so they get frustrated. Yeah. And then when athletes get frustrated, guess what? It's time to do something new. It's time to do something exciting, because when athletes get bored or lost, their first inclination isn't to look within and figure out what they can do, or why they've gotten bored, or why they've gotten lost, and then fix those. Their first move is to the credit card and to the registration button, because that's the answer to everything. You're like addicts. The triathletes are a more healthy form of addiction, in terms of, I need a race. I'm going to go drop $800. I'm going to sign up for a race, and 2 weeks later I'm going to think that was the worst idea I've ever had. And then I'm going to be stuck in it. Now I'm in that I have to phase. And, go back and think, it's just a great step to, and there is never a bad time of year to do your personal and triathlon inventory. Where am I succeeding? Where am I failing? What am I doing good at? What am I not doing good at? Emotionally, and because I'll be honest, and I put this on our closed Facebook group earlier this week, talking about the ability for coaches to take on a specific number of athletes has nothing to do with the triathlon like plans that they have. It's that what kind of mental and emotional energy they have to give to their athletes. And when you put that much towards your athletes, you're going to get a lot in return. And what I mean by getting a lot in return is the amount of work that you have to put in with athletes mentally and emotionally is huge. And other athletes this time of year find themselves in this kind of a mental and emotional, let me say, like where you're at right now. You were on a huge high coming off Chattanooga, training, everything's going great. And then the last, and we kind of covered this on Monday's podcast, because the last 2 weeks you found yourself more emotionally and mentally up and down than you have been probably all year. I think, and I think a lot of that has to do with fatigue in terms of being in the kind of that last Ironman training cycle. But the point I'm trying to make is that when you can look to your emotional and mental triggers and how those things correlate to completing workouts, finishing workouts, being consistent throughout the week, and then how you're set up for race day, it's never a bad time to look back and think, what am I doing well, and where do I need to improve on, and addressing those first instead of saying, you know what, I should probably register for this race next year because it just came out and Ironman Canada is going to be next year on August 30th. So you know what, I should probably do that because that will get me over this hump. And I think it's just a really healthy exercise to do, especially if you're in kind of the someone like yourself who's got 5-6 weeks left before Wisconsin, and you're always kind of tired. You're always kind of hungry, and the light is at the end of the tunnel, so it's even more kind of immediate, but you still know there's that much more work to do, and it's hard.
Yeah. Well, honestly, man, I know that I had a decent race at Chattanooga, but I didn't come out of there without. This is all relevant too, because I didn't come out of there like really on a high per se. I just felt like kind of that's where I was at, and I was satisfied that I had executed my race like I thought I could. And that was the thing, it's like you talk about addiction, and it was, my first inclination was to be like, all right, well, let's try another race and see how things are going. But the reality is like, I just was like I've been in sort of, for me, a patient mode, and that's kind of rare. It's so easy to throw a race in and just kind of test it out and see where you're at, and like that. But the more I get into this, the more I realize that throwing a bunch of races in there, it just really disrupts things. It's sort of that that it is an addiction thing. I watched this great video the other night with this clinical psychiatrist about alcohol, and he said, "Man, I grew up drinking, and let me tell you something. Alcohol is a fantastic drug. It buries your anxiety, it numbs it, and you kind of feel more outgoing and all these sorts of things. But obviously, in the long term, it's troublesome because you never deal with the original issue." But I thought it was interesting because he was admitting that it's almost glamorous and romantic in a way, where you go into these seedy places and you kind of just exist in there, and it's dangerous and all this sort of stuff. And I kind of feel like that's what signing up for races can be sometimes. It's sort of this short-term fix, and it's kind of like, yeah, it's exciting, I'm going to go do another race, but it has really no bearing on my long-term direction and goals. It doesn't. It does have bearing, but it doesn't have. It's not, supportive of my long-term goals. So, I don't know. Somehow I've been able to pull back, and I had looked at a couple of the races, and I thought, maybe I'm going to go to. When we go up to Ohio, I'll be there anyway. Maybe I'll just do Ohio, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm not. I'm going to try and just stay on my path, because that's been the one thing that I have really been cognizant of, is this idea of slow growth, slow improvement. And like you can't just turn it on. And that's why again, last night I was talking about this too. I was like, you go out and you're in a certain kind of shape, and then all of a sudden you see sort of like and it's sort of like going to Track Tuesday or something out of the blue. and all of a sudden you just kind of you're in the moment and you want to like see what you got, and you go out there and you're pushing. You're used to running 8:30 to 9:30 or whatever, and then holding like a long interval, maybe at 8 or say 9, whatever it is, and the next thing you know, you're trying to run 5 minute mile pace for 80 seconds or whatever the hell it is. And I got to thinking about that. It's like when you try speed work out of the blue like that, what happens is you're stretching your body to places that you don't ever stretch it. And all of a sudden you're doing it with intense physical exertion, and you're using all these tendons and tweaking all these little things around your ankle and your groin and your hips and your knees and stuff like that don't get extra, or don't get, they're not getting work. So all of a sudden your stride changes, you're running longer, you got all these different things going on. And that's what I was thinking about yesterday, is that that's why I like speed work on the bike so much, because you're doing the same pedal stroke basically. You know what I mean? You're not throwing your body out into new contortions and stuff like that. So you're within that same little wheel, and you're spinning around at the same kind of like place, but you're not like in running. People always talk about long strides and things like that, but if you're not doing long strides and all of a sudden you want to go out and test your body like that, you're going to be hurting. And that's what creates kind of consistent naggings and things like that. And I also think that can be, and I know we talk about swimming in the pool is hard is good, but you got to be careful. Like if you're swimming different when you're trying to swim hard and you're like, doing something your body isn't used to, it might get you a little bit. So that's why I was like leaning back to this bike. And then I also talked about if you want to work on your speed, work on it. Safer places to run up hills and just work on your pickups. Just keep those short strides that you're kind of used to, and just go up the hill a little bit faster. So anyway, that's all around to get. I don't know where the heck that came from, but
that's all right. It's in the right direction. It's in the right bucket. Before I touch on that and what you're talking about in terms of patience, I wanted to give a quick analogy that I thought of the other day. So reel me back in. But it's somebody posted in the closed group about why is it so different in open water and pool swimming, and the best analogy I could kind of think of was pool swimming versus open water swimming is like taking the high school basketball varsity player, on the basketball team. He's pretty good. Maybe he's the captain. And then you go put him in like Brooklyn or Harlem Park to play some pickup ball against some like 30, 40-year-old guys. He's going to get owned because it's a totally different game. It's the same, it's the same game, but it takes a totally different approach and skill level. That is the difference between even like, I'll be honest, even like going to like a lot of YMCA's, you'll see a lot of high school players think they're going to be, think they're going to take over the game. They hop in on the YMCA and they get owned by some 40 or 50-year-old dudes jacking threes and playing rough ball underneath. That's the difference between pool swimming and open water. It's just totally different mentality and totally different approach. Going back to your patience thing, that was just a small little sidebar brought to you by swimming. Yeah, is the two biggest areas where athletes lose patience and it costs them greatly is when they are showing a tremendous amount of recovery from an injury. They get impatient and they go out and do something they shouldn't do, and then they take 20 steps back and they get hurt again. Or when they're seeing a tremendous amount of fitness. Oh, you know what? You know what this means? It means I should keep pushing forward and do something to show off this fitness. Well, that's traditional thinking, but what you actually should do is think, oh, you know what? Now it's time to pull back. Whatever I'm doing is working. Let me step back for a minute, soak it all in, not be impatient, not test my fitness on track Tuesday, not go out and run when I shouldn't be running because my doctor said wait this long. It's like if I ever have an athlete that has any kind of an injury and the doctor says, all right, you can go run this week, I always say we're not running this week. We're taking an extra week. Because there's no one's ever gotten hurt from taking an extra week or an extra 2 weeks without doing this. But so many people have, by not listening to doctors and thinking that you know better, or it's not that you think you know better. It's just that your ego and your pride is so large that it totally overshadows any objective, logical thinking that you may be that you might have the opportunity to display on a day-to-day basis. That's what it really is. It's not that you think you know better. It's just that your ego and your pride is clouding all of your judgment. And so this time of year, when you have athletes that are struggling with kind of both sides of the patience, they're trying to stay patient and not do anything out of the realm of, like I had an athlete yesterday who texted me who's been showing some like pretty substantial fitness gains and here in like the last 2 or 3 weeks, and he sent me a text and he was like, "Hey man, how close is too close to do a sprint try before Ironman Wisconsin?" And anytime I get a text like that, it's because an athlete's starting to see, like, they're starting to feel themselves. They're like, I'm feeling pretty saucy right now. What do you think about this? The Chicago Sprint's 2 weekends before. Not sure if that would be a good speed workout before the big day. Am I talking crazy here? And I said no. And he said, "No, I'm not talking crazy," or "No, don't do it." And I said, "You're not doing one." He said, "Okay." And I said, "Yeah, glad we settled that." But that is exactly what happens. Is people show great fitness and they can't wait to show it off. But what you really should do is think, all right, let me look 2 or 3 backs and think, okay, why do I feel this way now? Oh, it's because I've been doing this. So if I continue to do this, then I'm going to really reap the benefits. It's like landscaping or flowers or harvesting. It's like if you harvest something too early because you get too antsy, you're not going to reap the whole benefit. You're not going to get it all. You're going to kill it because you're going to clip it. And then what you could have, instead of maybe 1 or 2 roses off your bush, or instead of getting the whole entire 8 to 12 roses, you're only going to get 2 because you couldn't wait to just prune it and you couldn't wait to get it out of the way. Mm-hmm. And that's what fitness is. People do it all the time. They trim their fitness flower. And don't make that a t-shirt. That's a horrible one. But what I'm saying is, in the terms of recovery, like, oh, I'm feeling great. I've never felt this good. I really feel like I'm on my way back. You know what I should do? I should go out and test my run. No, you shouldn't. You should play it even more safe and realize that what you're doing is working. But again, it all goes back to feeling rushed. Like the beginning of the podcast, circling back finally, is going back to, why do I feel like in a rush, and is it justified? Do I really truly have to do this? And if I feel like I'm in a rush, is that usually a good thing? No. No one usually makes great decisions or productive decisions that lead to positive outcomes by feeling rushed. It comes from logical thinking, making sure I'm making the right decision for the long-term game. It's not impulsive. It's not right that moment. It's strategic, and you have to show a tremendous. The best athletes that I know, the best athletes that I'm friends with, the best athletes that I work with have one really common thread, and it is they have a great ability and understanding about what it means to show restraint. Showing the ability to show restraint in training, to reel themselves back, to know when to hold them and to know when to fold them. That's the mentality that the best athletes have, because that leads to longevity, because an athlete has never gotten hurt from reining things back, but more than I know have dug too big of a hole because they couldn't rein themselves back and they couldn't make a really, really, really good decision to reel themselves in, to think, you know what, maybe 2 steps forward today is good enough. Maybe 2 steps forward is perfect, because what it won't lead to is 0 steps back. So you take 5 or 6 days in a row of just incremental 2 to 3 steps forward with no steps back, and look how far ahead you are, versus the athlete who wants to throw themselves forward 7 steps in a day, and then the next day they take 4 steps back, and the next day there's 0 steps forward and then 8 steps back. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest difference in mentality and approach and restraint, and just the overall ability to be objective day in and day out, it is such a hard attribute to have, and it's such a hard approach to have when you're looking at yourself. And again, that's why so many athletes get coaches of any kind. Is not to propel them forward or to motivate them to, pull tires across the parking lot on their lunch break. It's to tell them they're being a freaking idiot and they need to slow down and be smart. That's why people get coaches, because they get themselves out of their own way, because they take 20 steps forward and 15 steps back for a net of 5, where a coach could say, you know what, we might end up taking 3 or 4 steps back, but we're going to take 30 forward. And that's how we're going to get there. And that's why that's why usually athletes are more successful that way.
Let me ask you something. Let me get into that a little bit more. The idea of I'm going to use Ironman for an example because usually people are more engrossed in that and it's kind of takes over their life a lot more and whatever. So let's talk about why doing a race 2 to 3 weeks out from an Ironman, a short sprint, or like you said, or any other kind of thing like that is a bad idea. I mean, I have thoughts on why that is. I mean, first of all, it's almost like, you got this big long plan that you're going to follow, and then all of a sudden, the taper period comes around, and people are like, we talked about this, is that people look at taper and they're like, I get to kick back, I'm on the couch or whatever. But I still think that that's almost when you kind of need to start dialing up your focus even more and really draining that taper with the best intentions and the best of your abilities. And then that's not always hard to go into this thing and be thinking in terms of really tuning up. And talk about adding a race in there, just throwing a race in there that late. Why that's such a bad idea in your mind?
Well, it depends on the athlete, but it also depends I always ask it, what's the risk versus reward here?
Mm-hmm.
In a sprint try 2 weeks out from your biggest race of the year, I think you have more important things to do that weekend in terms of getting some longevity stuff in. And do you need is that sprint try going to make your Wisconsin day that much better? No, that's not. What you need is a longer ride. Now the duration is up for debate based on the athlete, but and the other big thing is, why would you put yourself in a scenario where you're totally healthy and you don't have to kind of unwrap your fitness present or put yourself in a situation where you could get injured or in a wreck or have some kind of adverse event happen to you with other, because listen, when you race, again, like we talk about all the time, it's not just you. Listen, the last 3 to 4 weeks before your big race, stay in a freaking bubble. I would even stay away from group rides. Just stay away from anybody who might just F your world up. Because it happens all the time. People are like, oh, I think this little race, and then they get clipped by a volunteer, they get clipped by somebody who doesn't know how to pass, and the next thing they go down there, breaks their collarbone 3 weeks out from Wisconsin, and now all their fitness is screwed, and they're going to be walking on race day wishing they hadn't have done that little sprint that they did just because they couldn't exude any amount of patience with their fitness. But the reason most athletes want to do one isn't necessarily because they always want to express their fitness. It's also because they have no idea how to contain this emotional and mental expression and harvest it in a good way to save it. They just want to spend it because it's a lot to handle. You put so much effort, you put so much time, you put so much effort into this one day, and oh my God, it's here. And and then what I'm doing is I'm tapering, and so I'm not working as much as I used to. So, oh my God, I'm getting slower. Oh my God, I'm getting fatter. Oh my God, I'm losing fitness. This is not going to be. I'm not going to be ready on race day. I'm going to be stale. I got to have a race. So they insert this thing that's going to make them not feel any fitter or get any faster. It's just simply going to be a filler to attach themselves emotionally, mentally to something else, so they can kind of forget what. Again, there's addicts. Just to forget to put the big day at ease, so they don't have to think about it because it's no longer what's next. Now they have something else that's next. And so I just think I think it's a total waste of time. I think it is. I think it's something athletes do with really no plan. They just do to do them, and that's also when, if you're not going into a race to race it, and you're not really aware, and you're not really present, and you're not really focused, that's also when you're just kind of out of there like, do. I got Ironman Wisconsin in 3 weeks and was out here racing this sprint, bam, wreck, cone, and you're down. They're not nearly as engaged, and not nearly as kind of hyper vigilant as you would be on if you're actually racing to race. And again, yeah, I mean, maybe it's the conservative route, but when you put yourself through that many hours and you sacrifice so much and you put so much effort into this one day, why risk it? I don't see the point. Save it and be ready and dial things in, because that's really what it comes down to is athletes love to dial things in to like 95 or 96. But asking them to dial it in those last 4 or 5 degrees is like excruciating. They're like, but it's so much slower, and I don't, it's uncomfortable, and I don't really know. And then once I get to 100, oh my God, now it's time. It's just, it's these last few weeks that just of dialing it in is just creates, man, it is where coaches, it's where coaches make their money in terms of athletes that they work with. It's like, because every emotional and mental expression is going to come out, the good, the bad, the ugly, and it's just like it's an emotional roller coaster. Because it's hard to dial, it's easy to dial things up to 95, 96, but then those last 4 or 5 degrees into race day where you can't do anything else but just execute and pay attention to the details, even though you don't think that they matter, they're huge. And and oftentimes they're what's going to allow you to go into a race peaked and crisp and fresh versus going into a race lazy, stale, unengaged, and just ready to get it over with. I've used this analogy many times. Like, so many times people approach Ironman like they approach like really, really long engagements. They're like, just take me to City Hall. Just let me get it over with.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want to get married, but I just really don't want to go through everything that's involved with just putting on a wedding and the invitations and the people and the bridal party. They just, and then by the time they get, and obviously like the day is much different, but like the lead up doesn't have to be like that, but that's the best analogy I can give to like how people feel leading up. They're like, I just want to get it over with. I'm just ready to do it. And I get that, but at the same time, you should always still be preparing to race it and understand that everything that you're doing is meant to fill in those final pieces of a puzzle before your big race, where it's a complete puzzle and you get to show everyone what you're able to do. Don't present someone this entire fitness puzzle that you put together for race day and you're missing like 6 or 7 of the main pieces in the middle because you just chose to take your taper, in a lazy, mentally and emotionally and physically detached way where you just ate whatever you want to because you're tapering and you're resting, and you ended up just being stale, versus the complete puzzle. The corners are perfect. The centers are everything that needs to be. It's the perfect picture of everything that you've tried to make it for the whole last year. Present that. Don't get lazy the last 2 or 3 weeks and just think, these pieces don't matter. I'm pretty much there. I got the edges at least. The middle doesn't really matter. You get the point.
Well, that's just a great point, because I think, again, the taper to me is when we tend to get sloppy, tend to get back into bad habits or whatever like that. And I think it's the time when we almost have to be most mindful during training, because if you think about it, that period is more like life than any of this intense training that we've been doing. So how are you going to handle life when you have to face it? And you get into these 2 to 3 weeks before an Ironman, and then all of a sudden, that bad habits start creeping back up. But like, think about them, and that's the way I'm going into this, is like, all right, how can I be more mindful right now? Because this is more my reality than doing 5-hour rides on the weekends. And how do I feel? Can I enjoy and celebrate this energy and use it in a productive way, rather than binging on, bad food and whatever, and just kind of like embrace my body and recover to the best of my ability and show up to that race without bags under my eyes. It's kind of like going to the wedding. It's like you want to show up in your best space. And how do you get there? And it's not easy. I don't think taper is it's kind of like not a relief for me. It's sort of like the hardest time, because you have to be super patient, and it's really a microcosm of everything else that's going on, and it's a great place to train your mind and your mindfulness.
It's like, we'll close on this, I'll give one last analogy, but the taper and the final lead in is like going to a destination where your final arrival is in like the metropolitan downtown of a big city, and it's an 8-hour drive, and you turn on your GPS and it directs you every certain way, and you follow it to a T, and it's perfect, and you're right on track. You never get lost, and then you think, I'm pretty much here. I can probably find my way, and you turn off the GPS. And the next thing you know, you've taken 2 wrong turns, you went down a wrong way street, and you end up 3 miles on the other side of town stuck in traffic. because you got so close, you just couldn't wait, and you thought you got it, and the next thing you know, you're lost. That's the opposite of what you want to do. Keep the training GPS on, stay focused, do what you're supposed to do, dial things in, make it exact, arrive on time, and be your best. That's what you should be able to do.
I like that, man.
Arrive on time and be your best.
Arrive on time. I'll work on that one.
Yeah, work on that one. Yeah, listen, that'll be a lifelong journey for you on that one. But yeah, that's all we got. We'll be with you next week. And then Mike and I, if you're going to Ohio 70.3, please reach out. We'll be there, Mike and I both. I'm sure we'll be around the race venue at least on Saturday, if not Friday and Saturday. We'll obviously be all over the course on Sunday. Looking forward to an awesome event put on by one of, if not our favorite race director, Ken Hammond. Really looking forward to the pizza, Snickers, and Coke afterwards. I couldn't be any more excited to have those refreshments. And I'm super excited for that. But yeah, please reach out. Let us know you'll be there. Please say hi. Again, as Mike is all about selfies, so you're welcome to take as many selfies as you want to with Mike. Mine are 99 cents. So take all the selfies you want with Mike. But no, we'll both be around. We'd love to talk to you. We'd love to meet you. Please say hi. I'm not nearly as, I'm kind of not as nice as Mike is, just in a different way. He's more cuddly and lovable, if you want to stick with that.
Come on, man.
But we'll be there. Yeah, no, we'll be there. We'll be up there, so please say hi. I know you do. I just sit back, relax.
Robbie, you're nicer than I thought you'd be. Yeah, it's like
exactly. Listen, I tell people all the time, like, they're like, why don't you ever dress up? I'm like, that's because when I do dress up, it's like I'm wearing a tux. But really all I'm wearing is like a polo and shorts. It's like, listen, it's under-delivered as much as possible and then oversell rarely. Kind of like the podcast. But anyway, we appreciate you joining us. We'll come back to you next Monday. If you're racing this weekend, have fun, do your best, execute, give your best effort, stay happy and healthy. If you have any questions for Mike directly, crushingiron@gmail.com is where you can find him. If you have any questions for me specifically, c26coach@gmail.com.
And that's a wrap on Crushing Iron Podcast number 286. And it's been a pleasure, my friend. I'm going to go out into the heat. I guess it's hot. You said it's hot. I haven't really been out there.
Yeah, it's hot, man.
All right, cool. Let's go take it easy then.
All right, dude.
All right, man. See you.